Let's jump right into this explainer and explore one of the most incredible 1,000-year chapters in human history. We're stepping back into a story from another time. It's a journey that starts in the quiet green mountains of ancient Japan and ends in the sudden deafening noise of a changing modern world. It's all about honor, the old world colliding with the new, and a spirit that absolutely refuses to disappear. So, as we step into those ancient mountains around 700 AD, I want you to keep this central question in the back of your mind. What does it truly mean to be a warrior? Is it just about fighting, or is it really about how you choose to live your life? Well, let's find out. Section 1. Birth of the Samurai, from farmers to protectors. We begin at the wild, dangerous borders of ancient Japan. The emperor's farmer soldiers were basically failing, creating a desperate, urgent need for a highly specialized defense force. Now, what's truly fascinating here is the intense childhood training these early warriors went through. Imagine this. Families in the countryside began training their sons entirely differently. They didn't just pick up a sword as adults. No, their journey began as small kids. They had to learn to sit totally still for hours on end, understanding that pain was a teacher, not an enemy. Step by step, they mastered the horse, mastered the bow, and mastered the long, curved sword, running and riding literally every single day. And the final step is absolutely crucial. They serve the Lord. They learned to fight not for money, but strictly for the powerful man who gave them land and protection. These early warriors were known as bushi, men constantly ready to stand and defend. So, the really important point to grasp is that a samurai's life belonged entirely to their lord. This meant that the daily preparation for death was actually their highest honor. If their lord commanded, they obeyed. If their lord needed them to die, they died. And this wasn't viewed as cruelty. It was the ultimate privilege. This whole mindset grew into what we call Bushido, or the way of the warrior. It wasn't just some textbook you could read, right? It was a philosophy encompassing loyalty, courage, respect, and the daily acceptance of death. A samurai woke up every single morning and accepted death, choosing a short life of honor over a long life of shame. But everything shifted massively in 1185 at the famous water battle of Donawara. For years, the two greatest family groups, the Taira and the Minamoto clans, had fought this terrible, brutal war. Think rivers of fire and literal walls of arrows. But here, in 1185, the Minamoto clan won definitively, just completely destroying their rivals. And from that monumental victory came something Japan had literally never seen before. The leader of the Minamoto clan, Yoritomo, didn't just politely return to the emperor as a loyal servant. No way. Instead, he created a military government called the Shogunate. The emperor still had his palace and his ceremonies, sure, but the real power, the power of the sword, now officially ruled the land. Warriors were no longer just servants, they were the true rulers of Japan. Moving right along to Section 2, the Age of War, the Sengoku period chaos. Starting in 1467, order just completely broke down. Warlords fought warlords, castles burned to the ground, and brother turned against brother. Samurai whose lords were killed became ronin. These were masterless warriors wandering the roads with their swords and their pride, desperately looking for a new purpose in over 100 years of absolute chaos. But out of 100 years of that dark chaos rose 3 extraordinary men who dreamed the impossible, uniting all of Japan under one rule. First, we have Oda Nobunaga, the innovator, a farmer's son who learned to think like a king. Then came Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the peasant risen to power, who had no noble blood but climbed from poverty to immense influence. And finally, Tokugawa Ieyasu, the patient victor, who watched, waited, and ultimately seized control. The first of our unifiers, Oda Nobunaga, ruthlessly changed warfare forever. You see, the old samurai traditions demanded that a single great warrior ride forward, crying out his name for honorable one-on-one combat using swords and horses. But Nobunaga, he saw Portuguese traders bringing firearms to Japan and immediately saw their devastating potential. It was a real game changer. He completely scrapped the individual combat cries and brought in Nobunaga's revolution, large groups of soldiers firing Portuguese firearms together in long, coordinated lines. It shattered the old traditions and won him battle after battle. Section 3. Warriors without a war, the paradox of peace. Think about this for a second. What do you actually do with a massive, highly trained army when there's literally no one left to fight? Tokugawa Ieyasu's victory in 1600 eventually ushered in over 200 years of peace, which presented a really profound, complicated gift to the samurai. So what do you do when you're trained for a world that no longer exists? Without wars, these fierce, refined warriors basically became officials, teachers, and, ironically enough, tax collectors. Yet they polished their armor and practiced their sword skills daily, not for the battlefield, but as a pure symbol of their inner spiritual discipline. It was during this time that the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi wrote the Book of Five Rings. It was a guide not just to fighting, but to thinking clearly, deciding carefully, and living with full attention. These were men who calmly carried death at their side every single day, even in times of total peace. Section 4. The Black Ships Arrive. The Collision of Worlds. That quiet era of Zen gardens and peace was shattered violently in 1853 when Commodore Matthew Perry's steam-powered black ships arrived from the United States. I mean, they didn't use sails. They blew thick, harsh, black smoke from massive metal chimneys and carried cannons so powerful a single shot could just obliterate a wooden building.
These terrifying, cannon-armed black ships essentially tore Japan into two opposing factions. One side said, look, we have to modernize and learn. They saw the foreign military strength and realized old swords couldn't stop steel ships. They wanted to build factories, steel ships, and modern armies modeled after the West. But the other side, heavily centered around the samurai, stood fiercely to protect tradition. They wanted to honor the old ways, reject foreign ideas, and absolutely maintain the samurai code, refusing to let 1,000 years of culture be destroyed.
Ultimately, the modernizers won. They restored power to Emperor Meiji, built a new army of ordinary citizens with guns, and then, in 1876, they passed a quiet but devastating law. The law stated that samurai could no longer carry swords in public. Think about that. For a samurai, the sword was his soul. Without it, walking down the street, he was suddenly just an ordinary man.
Some adapted and became politicians or businessmen, but others simply could not accept this complete erasure of their identity. This led straight to the final rebellion. In 1877, Saigo Takamori led thousands in a final tragic stand against the new gun-wielding National Army. Though they fought with incredible, undeniable courage, the battle just wasn't equal. Saigo was defeated, dying in the old way with honor, and the samurai as a recognized legal class were officially finished.
Section 5. A spirit that survives, the enduring legacy. Their legal class might have ended, but the spirit of the samurai absolutely did not die. It simply found new homes. It thrives today in modern martial arts, and you can see it so clearly in the deep-seated loyalty, incredible hard work, and personal honor that still exists in modern business culture. Looking back across this incredible timeline, from the samurai origins in 700 AD to the first shogunate in 1185, straight through the 250 years of peace starting in 1600, right up to the black ships arriving in 1853 and swords being banned in 1876, we see massive transformation. It proves that while every era must eventually change and give way to something new, true values like loyalty, courage, and honor never need replacing. And this matters today because you don't need to carry a physical sword to walk your own warrior's path. Choosing daily practice and discipline over laziness, having patience in the face of difficulty, and showing the courage to make mistakes and continue, that means you're carrying that exact same samurai spirit in your own self-improvement journey. Before we wrap up, I have a quick question for you all. 60 duels, 0 losses. If you want our next explainer to dive deep into a life of absolute discipline and extraordinary skill, the story of Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest undefeated swordsman in history, drop a comment below with the word Musashi. The warriors are gone, and the castles might be empty of their swords, but their lessons are still here, waiting quietly for you to listen, leaving us with this final, vital question to carry with you today. How will you walk your own path with honor?